So I'm glad Bruce is in here. I'm back to teach contracts classes for you guys. And today we are talking about, check the calendar, seller disclosures, preliminary title reports, HOAs, and Mellorews. That's a lot. The reason that we're talking about them all together is because when you get into contract on a property, within the first 7 days, the seller is going to provide to you their seller disclosures, the preliminary title report from the escrow is going to pull a preliminary title report and provide that. And they're also going to provide you with any HOA information and then any Mellorews information that they have, which is also going to be on the tax record and the title report. And so let's take a look at seller disclosures. In fact, I'm actually going to log into my email because I just got seller disclosures on a house, and I'd like you to see what it looks like. Okay, so these are the seller disclosures that we have filled out with the seller. It includes a real estate transfer disclosure statement, the seller property questionnaire, the seller's affidavit of non-foreign status, and a fire hardening hazard. There's probably a lot more that goes into this actually. Seller disclosures. No, sorry guys. All right, we're going back to that one. Okay, seller disclosures. So the seller is required to give out the TDS SPQ. You as an agent are required to do your listing agent avid. A natural hazard disclosure is also a seller disclosure, and I'll look at one of those for you as well. So we've got TDS SPQ, natural hazard disclosure, your listing agent avid, and any reports, any inspections, any reports, they're required to give those to you. Those are right of rescission documents. That means that if the seller hands you any one of those pieces of paper and it's new information to you, you now have 5 days to review that information and back out, even if you've removed your inspection contingency. So even if your inspection contingency has been completely removed before you got into contract, and they hand you the TDS or the SPQ or the listing agent avid or the NHD report, you get 5 days to inspect those documents and you can back out. Those 5 days expire. They're not like a contingency where you have to remove it in writing. It expires. So I have been in a contract where the seller, we were almost going to close escrow, and then something happened to the house, and the seller handed us an addendum to the TDS that said the home was broken into, and they damaged a bunch of the property, and my clients backed out and got their deposit back because that's our new disclosure. So as a listing agent, you really want to protect your clients from that ever happening. So before I go into contract, all of these documents are completed. So this is the listing I just put on the market, and we completed all the seller disclosures, and I handed them to the agents ahead of time and had them sign it before I was going to get into contract with them. Does that make sense? I have to sign disclosures, right? Okay, here we go. 107 pages, so this is a lot of disclosures. Okay. So agent visual inspection disclosure, this is my listing agent Avid. An Avid, and we will most likely have a class on an Avid, but your Avid is one of the most important pieces that you will complete as an agent. You have to complete an Avid, whether you're representing the seller or the buyer on every transaction, and you should have it done within the first 7 days of getting into contract. Agents inspections have limitations. I am not a home inspector. I do not check to make sure things work. All I do is walk into the room, look around, and see if I see any defects. Defects. I do. Oh yes. Question.
Sorry. It says not to open cabinets.
Correct.
Is that you're not allowed to open the cabinets, or if you're not required to?
You're not required to.
So I could, because it just so happened I was doing one day and I opened up a cabinet and there was all this fluffy growth on the ceiling, and I would never have seen that. No.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're not supposed to.
Not supposed to.
You really shouldn't have been opening up cabinets.
Okay.
That's a home inspector's job.
Okay.
Yeah, so you should be advising your clients to have a home inspector come and look at the property. Your Avid is not enough because you're technically only supposed to be walking into the room and visually looking at things, not going in and inspecting the cabinets. Now, if you did do that, you would need to disclose it.
It was like a door, and I, like, is this a doorway? Is this a, hall?
Yeah, that's okay.
It was above the water heater, and then it was.
You're not going to get in trouble
Okay.
for going that far. The thing is that it's kind of a CYA. If you open that door, why didn't you open the other cabinet? So you opened those cabinets, but you didn't go and open the rest of the cabinets. There was growth over there too. Now you're liable. It's not an open cabinet. That's a home inspector's job. That's the buyer's job. The buyer should open the cabinet and check all the cabinets. I help with the facilitation of them buying and selling property. That's about it. I'm not an investigator at all. And so it says here specifically, limitations, agent's duty is limited to conducting a reasonably competent and diligent visual inspection of reasonably and normally accessible areas of property being offered for sale. There are several things the agent does not do. What follows is a non-exclusive list. So it's not exclusive, so I can add to this. But the roof in the attic, I will not climb into the roof of the attic. They will not move or look under, behind furniture, pictures, wall hangings, floor coverings. Agents will not look into up chimneys or into cabinets or open locked doors. So you opened a door and it was a closet door?
It was basically like the closet where the water heater was, and it was in the kitchen. I didn't really think about it being a cabinet versus a door. I just opened it.
Okay.
And then there
in
was
the future, don't. Just cover you and don't open it. Like I go into the garage, but we know what a garage door looks like. So I go into the garage, I go into the kitchen. I don't go into pantries. If there's an open pantry, I don't go into the pantry. I go into the kitchen. And you'll see why, because it's all labeled out really for you. Interior. So we talked about the interior. The exterior, agent will not inspect beneath the house or other structures on the property, climb up or down a hillside, move or look behind plants, bushes, shrubbery, or other vegetation or fences or walls. Agent will not operate appliances or systems, such as, but not limited to, electrical, plumbing. I don't even turn on lights. I'm not looking for that. I'm just looking for what I see visually when I walk into the room, or what I see visually when I walk up. Appliances and systems, I'm not going to operate those. We said that. Size of the property and improvement. I'm not going to measure the square footage. I'm not going to verify improvement. I'm not going to identify or locate boundary lines. I'm not going to identify easements or encroachments. Now, if I know that you have a telephone pole in your backyard, I know that that's an easement. I know that because I know that for a fact. So I have told my client, hey, you have an easement. See that telephone pole in your backyard? They're going to come back here. If you keep your gates locked, they have to give you notice. But if your gate's unlocked, they're going to come back here. And that's fine. That's part of living in a city. I did not put it on my Avid, but it is something that I just let them know because that's something that I know. Does that make sense? Okay. Environmental hazards, agents will not determine if the property has mold, asbestos, lead-based paint, radon, formaldehyde, or any hazardous substance. We're not going to analyze soil or geologic location or condition. And off-property conditions, agent is not obligated to pull permits or inspect public records. I think this is a very important thing to know. I have a lot of agents that reach out to me and say, how do I look up permits? How do I look up zoning? And you can't or should not do that. And here's why. If you look up the wrong address because you made some clerical mistake, and you tell someone that a home has permits and everything is fine, and then that person buys that home and it doesn't have permits, and you're the one that told them that, you're the one getting sued to get the permits. It stinks. I used to want to be the person that would give everybody everything. I wanted to be the one that helped them out. Now I don't. And now I say, I'm going to give you the websites for you to create accounts with the county and the city, and you can actually look up permits very easily here. You just type in the address. But unfortunately, you shouldn't do that. Agent will not guarantee views or zoning, identify proposed construction or development or changes or proximity to transportation, schools, or law enforcement. I have people reach out to me and they say, I would like to buy a plot of land where I can grow whatever. And I say, great, you're going to want to contact the city and find out and get all the information on whether or not you're going to be able to grow there. I don't have to own the property. I don't have to abide by the laws. They have to, right? Now, if you would like to specialize in grow properties, or if you want to specialize in farming, you can go out and learn what it takes for them to grow specific kinds of crops, or what it takes and what that is. That's fine. But if you're a residential real estate agent and somebody wants to buy a $50,000 raw vacant piece of land, no, you do not go and find out if they can grow anything on it. That's completely up to them. And I let them know, if you're going to be buying this property for a business like that, whether it be pineapples or pot, you need to go to the county and understand your liability. What is the requirements for me as the owner and the person that's going to be running this? Any questions about what we don't do? Okay. An agent's, what this means to the consumer, that's what it's saying. An agent's inspection is not intended to take the place of any other type of inspection, nor is it a substitute for a full and complete disclosure by the seller. Regardless of what the agent's inspection reveals or what disclosures are made by the seller, California law specifies that a buyer has a duty to exercise reasonable care to protect himself or herself. This duty encompasses facts that are known to or within the diligent attention and observation of the buyer. So right there, it tells them it's actually your duty to investigate this property, not the agent's. The buyer should review any disclosures obtained from seller, obtain advice about and inspections of the property from other appropriate professionals, and review any findings of those professionals with the persons who prepared them. So when they call me and say, hey, there's something on the home inspection that I'm confused about, I say, awesome, here's the number for the home inspector. You pay him, reach out to him directly, ask him the question. He will explain it to you. What if the home inspector explains it to me and then I explain it wrong to my client? It's not gonna, I'm gonna get in trouble for that. So I don't do that. Let's get them, let me get you their contact information. Let's reach out to them. I'll text the guy and say, hey, my client's gonna reach out to you, but I'm not going to reach out and ask questions. I want them to get involved. I let my clients know ahead of time in my consultations that we are a team. And I have a lot of professionals that I work with on a regular basis that I'm going to bring to the table if you would like me to, but these are your people. You're paying the escrow officer, you're paying the home inspector, you're paying for all of it. So I want you to be happy and feel comfortable reaching out to those people directly. Would you like to pick the people or would you like me to pick them? They always say they want me to pick, but I set up the conversation with, you're paying for this. You're calling them. That's a person working for you. The escrow officer, I don't get wire instructions. I don't answer escrow questions. I say, that's an excellent question. I'm gonna get you hooked up with the escrow officer, or I'm gonna have the escrow officer reach out to you so that they can clarify that. I don't have to be everything to everybody anymore. All I have to be is there for them in the capacity that I can be, and then get them into the hands of somebody that can help them, right? There's nothing worse than answering a question wrong when it could have just been handled by the professional who does the job, right? Okay, so the way that this is filled out is address up top. If there's a duplex or a triplex or a fourplex, you put the unit number, and you have to do an avid per unit. So if you're doing a duplex, there's an avid for unit 1 and an avid for unit 2. You put your broker name here. You don't have to put SAC Metro. You could just put Keller Williams Realty, by the way, or whatever. If you're in your Yuba or whatever, all you have to do is put Keller Williams. It's going to ask you the broker name again of who performed it. It's going to ask you the inspection date and time and the weather conditions. Other persons present, if there are other persons present, just list their names. I don't like to do my avid at the same time as the home inspection, because then anything that the home inspector tells me or shows me, I have to list on my avid, and I don't want to do it. So I go before the home inspection, or sometime alone. I want to be alone. I don't bring my friend. I don't bring anything else. I don't want anything to come in the way of me and my avid getting completed by me and me alone. And the reason being is that if I list somebody else on that, and then I did something wrong, that person's going to be brought in too. And then now I've got a witness against me. Like the number one reason that people get out of real estate is because something like that happens and they get sued and there's a financial situation. It happens a lot. It's usually over money. People usually get out of real estate over money, and it's either because they didn't make any, or they were making some and they got sued and lost it. And so that's how you've got to think like that. You've got to think in the, how do I cover my butt? Okay. So the undersigned, based on reasonably competent and diligent visual inspection of the reasonably and normally accessible areas of the property, states the following. Entry, discoloration on concrete. The reason that I put that is because there was rust stains on the concrete from where a flagpole used to be. And that's the only thing I could see when I walked up to the house. Everything else looked pretty good. So I walk up to the house and I'm like, okay, there's not much here. So now I know that they're rust stains because I am a reasonably competent 35-year-old person who has seen rust stains before. However, did I test them chemically to verify that they are that the orange is actual metal rust? No, I didn't. So therefore, I don't know that it's actually rust. And I have to say that it's a discoloration because it could be paint. It could be so many other things that I don't know. I think that's what it is, but I don't know. So I put discoloration on concrete. That saves me because say that the buyer says rust stains and they say, oh, it's just rust. I can get rust out, and then it's not rust. And they can't get it out. I know it sounds like really paranoid and crazy, but this is what people do when money comes into play. When people start having to spend money that they didn't want to spend before, they start pointing fingers. This has happened to me. I have had a client get into a situation. They wanted this house so bad. It was an old fixer-upper. They wanted it so bad. My dad's a contractor. He's going to redo the property, and then they forego inspections. They get into the property, and the flooring, the foundation is pillar and post, which is old 1920s flooring, and it's deteriorating. The house is sinking. Guess who they called? Me. And guess who they were mad at? Me. I sold them the shit house. Sorry, that's what it was. I sold them the house. They were totally fine putting $50,000 into a kitchen, right? They didn't do that. I'm just saying, people are okay putting $50,000 into something that's going to make their life. No one is okay putting $50,000 into something that they never see. Does that make sense? Like, she was so happy to completely redo this property and spend all this money on tiles and baths, but as soon as it turned into, now I have to have a new, I have to jack my house up and get the foundation fixed, that took out her money for that bath. Okay, so they call me and they're like, well, you earned a commission off of this. You must have sold us a dud. Look at how well you made out. And this is years later. And then I had to have a very nice conversation, like, hey, you guys, I love you, I appreciate you and your business. You're the ones that wanted to forego a home inspection. Here's the documentation that says I recommended it, and then you waived it. So what happened if I didn't have that documentation? Where do you think that was going? That was going straight to court. And if I didn't have that documentation, and if I hadn't been the kind that I don't trust anybody as far as I can throw them. If I had been the agent that was like, I don't need an inspection waiver, they're good people, we're fine, then I would be sitting in a courthouse or a courtroom and I would be getting sued, potentially for much more than what I earned in commission on that deal. So it's important to cover you because you never know who, this is somebody I've known since I was 15 years old. Okay, so keep that in mind. All right, so the living room, various wear and tear on baseboards. I say various because I'm not going to count the wear and tear. If you see one hole in the wall, you don't say one hole in wall. In fact, if I saw one hole in the wall, I would probably assume there's other holes in the wall, and I would want to broaden my scope and say various. Various is like, it's open-ended. So there's various wear and tear on the living room baseboards. There's various wear and tear on the baseboards in the dining room, but that's it. Everything else looks pretty good. Like when you walked in the room, it looked like a normal room. In the kitchen, there was nothing to be noted. There was no chips in the countertop. There was nothing that visually that I saw that was a problem. However, I have to say that I entered the room. So the worst thing that you can do to yourself as an agent is have a blank avid. Even if you have a blank avid and have a time and a date, they cannot guarantee that you went into each room. And that has happened. So if I would have gone to the kitchen and said there's nothing there and not notated it, and then something happens in the kitchen and I end up in court and they say, well, it looks like here's your avid. And it looks like you went into every room of the house. Did you go to the kitchen? Yes, I went into the kitchen. Absolutely. There was nothing wrong with the kitchen visually. Okay, well, there's nothing here that says that you went into the kitchen. Even though this form is filled out by me, myself, I'm the one that filled it out. If I don't fill it out correctly, it will be used against me later on. So if there's nothing wrong with it, nothing noted. I have avids that say, nothing noted, nothing noted, nothing noted, nothing noted. It's an acknowledgement that I stepped foot in the room. Other room, this was another living room. So instead of just leaving it as other, I specified what room it was. You'll see that I do that here. Bedroom 1 next to the kitchen. Because there's a bedroom, there's 3 bedrooms, and there's one on one side of the house and there's one on the other, and then there's the main bedroom. For fair housing laws, I highly suggest you get away from calling it a master bedroom. That's the next word that will be canceled out of our business. It is not a master bedroom. Master equates to, what was a master?
Slaveholder.
The slaveholder. And that's what a master bed, that's actually what it is. That's why we call it a master bedroom, because that's where the master of the house lived. But masters of the house, it's just a thing.
Like abuse.
It's just so much. It's just, there's so much. So get away from it. Call it the main bedroom. Call it the main bedroom. Okay, so bedroom number 1, next to the kitchen, nothing noted. Okay, so let me talk about this living room floor. If you went into this house, it's so cute, it's pristine, it's adorable. For their living room, they had an addition done with permits, and it's on a concrete slab. And that concrete slab is just concrete, but they acid washed it. So it's really cool. like orange and all these colors. Concrete slabs have cracks. All of them. Concrete is a very porous and hard substance, but the ground shifts, right? Dirt shifts, the earth shifts. So when you walk into this living room, you can see cracks going across the floor. And we had some people come and say, well, the foundation is cracked. So funny. So if you can't stick your finger all the way in it, it's not a crack that's a problem. Does that make sense? Your concrete slab is 6 inches into the ground, or sorry, 6 feet into the ground. The stem wall is 6 feet in the ground, and the concrete, I think, is 4 feet of concrete that is poured. That crack that is this deep, like tiny little crack, is not going to be a problem. It's when you can stick your entire finger in it. That's when that crack goes down 1 to 2 inches, that's when you might have a problem. But that crack, those cracks exist there and people can see them. So I had to say various cracks in concrete floor. Some of the floor is covered by a carpet. Do I lift up the carpet? No, I don't. I didn't lift the carpet, but I could see a crack running from one side to the other. So I'm assuming there's more. So I said various cracks in the concrete floor to protect myself. The hallway looked beautiful, nothing noted. There's a bedroom next to the kitchen, nothing noted. The main bedroom I went into next, nothing noted. Third bedroom is just the spare bedroom. Various wear and tear on the carpets. The carpets were worn. They didn't look pristine and perfect. Never say new. Never. Don't say new. You can use the word new in descriptions, housing descriptions, if it has never been used. So a new build, they can call it a new build because it's never been lived in. The day it's been lived in one day, it's a resale. Because if it's been used, it's no longer new. It could be like new, but it's not longer new. So when you put a listing up on the MLS and you say new floors, and people live there and they've been there for 6 months, no, that's false advertising. It's the same with your Avid. I see agents that will put new floors, new paint, new, and I'm like, that's not a defect. We're looking for defects only. Defects only. I've had an agent say, fan spins dangerously fast. And I said, why did you turn the fan on? That's not your job, right? So just be aware. It's
already on.
Huh?
What if it was already on?
How would it be already on?
How would it not be?
You're going to the house.
If somebody lives there and you say, hey, I need to do this walkthrough, and they leave.
And they leave the fan on?
Yeah, there's always a fan on my house.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. You can put it down. It's not, you're not gonna get in trouble for saying the fan is spinning dangerously.
Yeah.
You're gonna get in trouble for not putting something.
You just made the statement, why'd you turn the fan on? Fan was probably part of
It wasn't.
Or
She turned
he
all the
flipped the,
No,
he flipped the switch and it was all in one.
yes.
So
Still,
that,
you're not supposed to flip the switch for the lights.
even if it's dark,
You shouldn't be going and doing your Avid in the dark.
got it.
Yeah, so you need to get it done within the first 7 days. It needs to be daylight. And it should technically be it should be a clear day. If it's raining and you have to get it done, that's fine. But you still shouldn't be, it says, I don't turn lights on, I don't do that. So say that I turn a light on and it doesn't work. I can notate that. But I don't have to turn that light on. Does that make sense?
So if a ceiling fan isn't balanced, sometimes they'll just like fly around, you know? Could that have been what she was referring to? That
That's
it was-
exactly what she was referring to.
Okay, it wasn't the speed of the blades, it was that it was not balanced, and so.
It was just a really fast fan. The fan was really, really fast. No joke. Get a home inspector to come out and talk about the fan. That's my thing. It's just, it's not needed. So here's what my broker said when I got this from her. They said, well, she cleared her cellar of anything. She was so detailed that now if the buyer gets into the house and anything goes wrong with anything that she listed, he's not coming back to the seller for it, for anything. So did she do a good job for her client? Not necessarily. The whole beauty of it is that the client goes after the seller. if something goes wrong, if the seller doesn't disclose something, the buyer can go after the seller. If the agent discloses, if the buyer's agent discloses all of this stuff that the seller did, now the buyer has to just take it. Does that make sense? Yeah. You want your buyer to get inspections from professionals. If you walk into a house and a fan is dangerously spinning, then you say, we need to get a home inspector in here. And that's the end of that. We need to get a home inspector or an electrician in here to look at this. I can't determine what's going on.
But you don't put it on the added at all.
Have to, right?
If not, so a dangerously spinning fan, that's an opinion. She did not have to put that on there at all. No, she didn't. If you walk in and you see that the fan is damaged and it's broken and it's not working, yes. Absolutely.
It's almost like they've made it so general that what's the point? No. I mean, what
Because
is,
you're not, because it's just that you're required to walk through the house and visually inspect it.
it just, I guess because I've done so many home inspections as a housing inspector.
Oh,
You
okay.
know, where it's like I'm super detailed. To have the concept of walking into a room and just like looking around, it's like, that's not even an inspection. You know, that's just like
It is,
what,
though.
that's what an average, you know, person on the street would just happen to glance at and notice.
Yep.
And that's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're not an inspector anymore.
I know, it's so hard.
You're a real estate agent. You help facilitate the sale. And you help direct them in getting proper professionals to help them with that, to facilitate that. When you step over your bounds, that's when you get into problems. And the issue doesn't come that you said too much until it does. Because she turned on that fan. What about the rest of the fans? You didn't check the rest of the fans. So this fan spins bad, but you walked into another room and that fan didn't turn on. So that's why I don't turn on lights. Because if I turn on one light, now I gotta turn them all on. There's a specific system that we use called Glide that has us fill these out. It's really easy. TCs use it all the time. And it asks you to take pictures. Don't take pictures. Don't. So the way that I look at this is the state of California requires me to fill out this form. And this is the #1 form that can help me get sued. So I do my absolute best to cover my butt so that I am protected. I do what California requires me to do. This is a seller disclosure I'm required to do, but I'm covering me. I'm covering me. I'm allowed to, I read it and I'm like, okay, I'm not supposed to turn on light switches. I don't turn the switches on. I go in the morning time when the sun is brightest and I walk through the house.
I had a buyer who went to see truly a new house that was just finished being constructed. And she wanted her brother-in-law to come along, who was a builder.
Okay.
And he found ridiculous things. And then I was standing right there. And so it was really hard to know whether I should write this down. And my broker at the time never said, be so general. So I had all this stuff in this Affidavit. It was horrible. Then he says, oh, that's too much stuff. And I'm like, well,
You didn't tell me what to do.
right.
Okay, so that's why I don't have people come with me to do my habit.
Right. No, I totally see that.
Yeah, and also he's not allowed to inspect the home.
Huh?
So, the only people that are allowed to, like, once you get an accepted offer, the buyer's allowed to inspect the property all that they want after the offer is accepted. So I have clients all the time, they're like, hey, my brother's gonna come, he's a contractor, he's gonna come look at the house during the showing. And I say, okay, he's allowed to visually look at the house with us. He can't get under the house, he can't get into the attic, he can't inspect the property. You don't have an invested interest in the property yet. And this is still owned by somebody else. So you have to abide by their rights, and you don't have the right to investigate their property because they haven't given you that right in writing. The only time they give an buyer and the right to inspect the property in writing is once an offer is accepted. So I have clients like that all the time. Oh, we want to inspect it before we put an offer in. Unfortunately, you can come and you can like walk around, but you can't inspect the property until you have an accepted offer. Okay, so bath #1, I use the main bathroom, nothing noted. Bath #2, guest bathroom, nothing noted. There is no bath #3. So if there is nothing else, you don't have to say that, you just don't fill anything out. I did put another laundry in the hall, because there's a laundry room in the hall. And then the garage of the parking, I walked down the garage and there's discoloration on the concrete flooring, which is pretty normal. And then I walked around the exterior and I looked for defects, again, defects. Now I'm talking like defects, like rot that I can see through. Not that you know that that could potentially be dry rot, because you've seen it a lot. You're not a dry rot inspector, you're not a structural pest inspector, so you can't say that. So it's gotta be like defect, paint chipping. If paint's chipping off, you can write paint chipping, various paint chipping, various cracks in paint. If the grass is brown or there is no grass, sometimes I like to notate that, and I'll say various patches in grass browning in various areas, things like that. Especially if you see the picture on the listing and it's green. If you see the picture and it's green and then you go there and it's not green, like on mine, the grass was completely overgrown. It was like they hadn't mowed in months. And so I notated that the grass was overgrown because that's not what it looked like in the picture. So that means that it was a defect in my mind. And of course, that's what coaching is for, and that's what your broker is for. So if you ever have any questions, then you just reach out to me or you reach out to Bruce Hammer and say, hey, I'm doing my Avid. Amy confused the crap out of me at class the other day. I have no idea what to put down and I want to cover myself. Here's what I'm thinking. And then either one of us is going to say, okay, yay or nay, right? Here's what you do. So that's an Avid. It's signed by you as the person performing the inspection. It's signed by the buyer. It's signed by the seller. And then it's signed again by the agent at the bottom and basically acknowledging this one. So it's signed by you twice, by the way. Then the buyer's agent completes one too. So there's going to be a second Avid that's done by the buyer's agent. And it's going to be different. And they're going to say things on there that are different than yours, and you don't have to change yours. Also, seller disclosures and inspections are separate, and you don't have to change your seller disclosures just because you learned something new on an inspection. The inspection serves as the disclosure. Does that make sense? So no matter how you get it to them, it's either that you provided them with an inspection or you provided them with some kind of written disclosure, but you don't have to change just because you provided an inspection.
Have you ever had somebody want you to change what you wrote on your Avid?
Yes.
What do you do?
No.
Okay.
No. So I had Tyra's dad. I love him so much. My best friend listed, her dad and mom listed a house with me. This house was their rental and it was trashed. And I walked through the house and I did my Avid and I said, scuffs on the baseboard, scuffs on the floor, scuffs on the counter, scuffs on the countertop, various everywhere. And he called me and we're family basically, and he was pissed. And he's like, Amy, why are you trying to prevent my home from selling? And I said, Glenn, that's not what's happening. That's not what's happening. I'm required to do this state of California. Everybody is. Scuffs on the floor are not going to prevent this home from selling. We're already in contract. Like they saw it. Does that make sense? So it's not going to prevent the home from selling, and it's not going to prevent them from getting money. It's going to protect them. So that way the buyer can't come back and say, well, I never actually looked at the property. And you didn't tell me that there were scuffs all over the floor. That's what it does, right? So it's really a CYA for the seller as well. That's why when that agent put all that stuff on that Avid, that very detailed Avid, that's when my broker was like, well, all they did is protect your seller. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So this is before I move forward, does anybody have any questions regarding the Avid?
I do.
Yes.
Who's Wesley and Associates?
That is the buyer's firm.
Buyers.
So I am the firm representing the seller, and this is the firm representing the buyer. That's okay. Okay, so let's talk about the real estate transfer disclosure, aka TDS. They're gonna call it a TDS.
Total dissolved solids.
Yeah, exactly. So the TDS, and I tell my clients, I leave this with them. I take 2 copies. I take the TDS and the SPQ to my listing appointment and I hand it to them and I leave it and I say, here's your homework. I want you guys to read this thoroughly and then you're going to fill this out. This is the forms that you will be responsible for. Half the time they read them and then don't fill them out and I have to send them to them digitally anyway through Glide, Find, whatever. But I just like to get a copy in front of them. So that way, again, when we show up to court and they say, well, Amy actually didn't help me fill these out. Amy sent me a website called Glide, and actually Amy didn't send it to me, her transaction coordinator sent it to me, because that's what's gonna happen. So Amy's transaction coordinator sent me the seller disclosures and I filled them out, but she didn't help me. She didn't tell me, I didn't know. And then I get to go back and say, actually, on the date of our appointment, I brought you the TDS and the SPQ and I left it behind for you to fill out this way. You reached out to me through this text message or whatever and said, you can't fill them out. So I put in a request to have them sent to you digitally. But I did sit down with you and talk to you about these documents and give you a copy. I also emailed you a copy. So I mean it when I say CYA. I have had clients that I thought were the nicest, sweetest people in the world. And as soon as something went wrong or not in their favor, they turned on me like that. They turned on me. So now I don't blame them. I don't blame anybody and I don't judge them and I love them. I still help them to this day. The thing is that when people get put into a pinch with money, they start pointing fingers and they're going to point it back to whoever's going to pay them first. And I'm the first person that got paid. So they're going to come back to me, right? And that's okay. I understand. I'm just very smart and I put these things in place so that I don't have that problem. So that way when they do come back, they're like, oh, well, you did. No, sorry, honey. I got an email right here that says that I sent those documents to you for you to fill out on your own. And I explained to you that you need to read them in detail and that this is your homework. So if you decided not to read the document or consult me, I did what I need to do, right? It's just see right. Okay. All right. So there is no substitute for disclosures. This is a civil code that the seller is required to fill out seller disclosures. I've had a seller before say, I don't want to fill out the seller disclosures because I don't want to disclose things. And I said, well, then you can't sell your property. Because in the state of California, the seller is required to disclose. There are other states where the seller is not required to disclose. So he's not a bad person. I'm putting this into perspective for you guys because you're going to hear this and you'll be like, well, they're trying to hide stuff because they don't want to disclose. No, he's from Arkansas. Arkansas doesn't have a disclosure. It's a buyer beware state. So the buyer's required to do that. So it wasn't that he's a shady person or that he's bad. He's just like, why? I don't know this California state law. I don't want to fill this crap out. And I was like, well, here it is. Here's the civil code that says that you have to fill this out. And if you don't want to, then we're not going to be able to move the sale. Simple as that. And then he filled them out. Okay. So you might get some people that are like, fine. The following disclosures and other disclosures required by law, including the natural hazard disclosure, report and statement that may include airport annoyances, earthquake, fire, flood, special assessment information, have or will be made in connection with this real estate transfer. So it says right there, disclosures required by law and they are intended to satisfy the disclosure obligations on this form. You have to include any inspection reports completed pursuant to the contract of the sale. So if you're a seller and you got a pest inspection done ahead of time, you need to include that report. If you got it cleared, you need to include the report and the clearance. You can't just include the clearance. You need to show them what the problem was before you fixed it. Does that make sense? So if you get a home inspection and then you fix everything, you need to give the home inspection and then tell them what you fixed. Or get a new home inspection. So that's another way that people do it. If they don't want it, and if they don't want the old inspection to be something they disclose, you got to get a new one that shows the new current state. Now, and this is getting really deep, but So my seller goes and gets a roof inspection. The roofer says the house needs to be replaced, or the roof needs to be replaced. So my seller says, that's stupid. I'm gonna go to this other guy that I know, and he's gonna give me a quote, and they give him a quote for a repair. Which report do you need to provide to the buyer? Both of them. So I go and I get a home inspection done. That I get all the repairs fixed. I have a contractor come in, I fix everything, and then I go get a new company to do the home inspection.
Couldn't they find more things then?
Potentially, but I'm just saying, so I get a new company because I don't like this company. What reports do I need to give to the buyer? All of it. I need to give the report that started it, the contractor's receipts or invoices and stuff like that, and then the final report that I got after the fact. If I work with a contractor who doesn't provide receipts or invoices, how do I prove that the work was done? Right? So I have a lot of friends and they're like, oh, my buddy's gonna do it. Cool. You need to get your buddy to give you an invoice, because if you can't provide some sort of invoice from a licensed contractor, then they're just gonna want to get their own inspector out to look at it. So I like to prepare my sellers with, what are you gonna get done? Who's gonna do it? Let's get it done right and make sure that we get some sort of documentation for it. Otherwise, it's just gonna create this big old mess. Because if I have a buyer and I get into a contract with you and you're the listing agent, and you tell me that the seller did all these repairs, but you have nothing to show for it, then we're coming in with an inspector and we're gonna re-inspect everything and we're gonna make sure that it's done. And now all that money that you spent could potentially go, you know what I mean? Yeah. Sellers doing repairs on their own. I'm gonna put this out there too. Sellers doing repairs on their own, I do not recommend it ever. Like I tell them, okay, if you want to be held liable for that repair for the future, then yes, go ahead and do the repair. But if you would like to take liability off of you, should that repair go wrong after the sale, then I would highly recommend that you hire somebody, write a receipt to the buyer, and then the buyer can go back to that person versus coming back to you. Lots of people want to do their own repairs, i.e. my dad. And my dad's like, I'm doing it right. They can come call me if they want to. And I'm like, okay, fine. But that's what's going to happen when the repair breaks. They're going to call you and want you to come back and fix it or pay for it. But if you go through a company, that company has to come out, fix it, repair it. Does that make sense? So if you want to be responsible for the repair for the long term, then go for it. Okay, so let's talk about the seller's information. The seller discloses the following information with the knowledge that even though this is not a warranty, prospective buyers may rely on this information in deciding whether or on what terms to purchase the subject property. So it says to the buyer, it's your responsibility to inspect this property. Don't count on seller disclosures. But it also tells the seller, the buyer's probably going to count on this. I tell my buyers all the time, I don't care about seller disclosures, to be honest. It's the seller who's selling you their property. Do you really want to trust their disclosure only? No, let's get inspections done, because the seller, I mean, I walked into a property that has a very active plumbing leak, and the seller has said, well, I didn't know that that was leaking. I didn't know. And I'm like, you didn't see the water on the floor? You haven't been cleaning this up for years? So again, don't trust just the seller. Okay, so the following representations are made by the seller and are not representations of the agent. If any, this information is a disclosure and is not intended to be part of the contract between the buyer and the seller. Seller is living in the property, is not living in the property. And then they need, the subject property has the items below. If they check the items below, they have to leave the items below. One of those things being the garage remote. I've had a seller check the box that garage remotes exist and that there are 2 garage remotes. And then when the buyer showed up to get to the property, there's no garage remotes. So then I got a call from the buyer's agent, hey, where's our garage remotes? And I was like, oh, they're not there? Okay, let me call the seller. I called the seller, yo, where's the garage remotes? We took them. Well, okay. She's like, yeah, they're really nice. They cost a lot of money and I want to keep them and they're reprogrammable. Garage remotes go everywhere. So I said, unfortunately, on the document that you signed, that says what's included in the house, you put the remotes. So now you can keep those remotes, but you need to go buy the buyer new remotes. And so I get back to the agent and I'm like, hey, they're gonna buy new remotes. Now she agreed. If she would have said, no, we don't want new remotes. We want the remotes that were included in the house. The seller would have to take the remotes back to the buyer and buy their own new remotes. Otherwise, they could get sued. And who wants that? So these are just little things, like that seems so simple and little, but it can turn into a big blow up if people aren't negotiable. Like if the buyers are like, no, F that, I want those remotes. It could be a thing. Okay, so they put everything on here. Exhaust fans. It looks like they've got some stuff written on an addendum here. We'll look at that. Laundry, 20 volt in the laundry room, wood burning stove. Roof composition, age, approximately 15. They've got a small metal shed in the back and a portable garage that they are including. They are including this. They said, hey, should we list this on the TDS? I said, only if you want to sell it with the house. And then there's a text overflow addendum. It says, are there, to the best of your seller's knowledge, any that are not operating condition? They put yes, and if you write yes on this in any capacity, you have to put something in there that says why. Okay, so let's go to the text overflow addendum, which is attached right here. So exhaust fans, kitchen, both bathrooms, laundry room. So that was number one, where it said text overflow addendum, TOA. And then it said items not working condition, patio, left rear deck piling has dry rot and is being supported by temporary blocks. Overall deck support structure condition is poor. So my clients in the backyard have this beautiful covered deck. It's a big wood covered deck. It is not attached to the property whatsoever. It's just in the backyard. They said, it's falling apart, Amy. It's a hazard. When I bought it, it was a hazard, and the seller told me it was a hazard, and we haven't done anything to it. We just use it. So what should we do? And I said, we should tell people it's a hazard. That's it. Did it prevent the house from selling? No, we got $60,000 above asking price. It's not what you disclose that prevents the home from selling. It's what you don't disclose that comes back to bite you in the butt. So we disclose the problem. Some sprinkler heads in the front yard need to be cleaned and replaced to provide full coverage. No working sprinkler system in the backyard. Some gazebo roof shingles are missing. Overall roof condition is poor, though it does not leak. So it's just telling them, hey, here's the truth, right? Like dating, don't you want the truth up front? Here's all my damage. Here's how I'm gonna, right? All right, so let's take a look. Let's go back up here. And so we looked at the text overflow addendum for this, and we understand what's going on here. So let's see here. Are you aware of any significant defects, malfunctions in any of the following? Yes, they are aware of defects in the windows, the slab, the sidewalks, and the walls. And the answer is on the TOA. So let's go look. Let's go look at the TOA. Here's the TOA, explanation of defects. Slab in the living room has a crack. Now they've been told twice, by me and by the seller, that there's a crack. Can the buyer come back and say, oh my God, we didn't know about the crack when they move in? No, you knew about it. We both told you. Sidewalks on the right side of the house has a crack. Sidewalk in the backyard has a section that is lifted due to a tree root. RV access slab has cracks. I love this seller because they listen to me. Just disclose it. Like, no one's gonna not buy your house because there's a crack in your pavement backyard, right? We see that everywhere. Okay, a couple fence posts in the front of the house are wobbly. He's so cute. I just know this seller personally, and he's like such a sweet guy. So I just think this is really funny the way he wrote this out. Walls, fences, a couple fence posts in front of the house are wobbly. Window in front bedroom has a small hole in the exterior pane. Interior pane has no holes or cracks. Okay, great. Thanks, Marty. Okay, so Marty filled this out and we get it, and he filled this out and we get it. Okay, so now he's got some questions to answer. Now, I tell my clients you need to read each of these questions carefully because you're inevitably going to want to mark no for everything because you get 2 or 3 down and it's a no. Don't. read the question. And the number one question that they miss is number 2. Features of the property shared in common with adjoining landowners such as walls, fences, and driveways. I don't think there's a house in Sacramento County that doesn't share a fence with someone, unless you've got open land. But it's really rare. So I always tell them, make sure you check that box that says yes. And then right down here, you mark fences. Because that's what's shared, right? It says walls, fences, driveways. It's very open-ended, so then put what you mean. So then the next one is, fill. What did they say? Compacted or otherwise. Fill is dirt brought in. So it's not the dirt that you already have, it's dirt brought in of the property or anything thereof. There's a raised planter bed in the backyard. He's so cute. I'm fine with this. Like, it's better to disclose and be wrong that I didn't have to disclose that than to not disclose. Myself, hey, John. Oh, never mind. He's gone. Bye. Never mind. He's out. He's gotta go. I was gonna say my seller disclosed a raised planter bed. He would laugh.
Now, regarding the wobbly fence posts, would
Yeah.
is wobbly better than loose? Or is there any?
Whatever the seller wants to describe it.
So did they tell you this and then they didn't type this in, right?
They type this in.
Really?
No, I do not do this. It says,
Very well done.
well, that's because they did it through Glide. So there's a system called Glide. If you are within the coaching program for your first 3 transactions, you're going to use a transaction coordinator. That is Esperanza Hall and 13 at Enhanced Transaction. They're going to send you a document for your Avid. They're going to send you a link for your Avid and these seller disclosures through a system called Glide. Glide is so good because it gives these little pictures and it says, Mr. Seller, say yes or no. And if they say yes, it says, please explain. And then it puts this C2, it puts that C2 in there.
Nice.
And whatever their explanation is. So he didn't say C6, there is a raised planter. If he filled this out, it would have said there is a raised planter. That's it. Okay, and then the last one that's usually a yes is CC&Rs or deed restrictions or obligations. And it's usually always a yes. Most neighborhoods in the state in California have CC&Rs, covenants, conditions, and restrictions. CC&Rs are what help prevent your neighbor on 0.14 of an acre from getting a horse in the backyard. That's what CC&Rs are for. They're laws that run with the land. I will say this, the state of California is trying to do away with CC&Rs because a lot of them, like East Sacramento CC&Rs, are racist and discriminatory. So if you sell a home in downtown Sacramento and you receive CC&Rs, you can look through the language and you can find discriminatory language that's outlawed now. So if you see that in there or your clients see it, you can reassure them. Sometimes it's been redacted, sometimes it's not. The document's just so old that it's still there in the county records. And so I just let my clients know, if you see anything like that, disregard it completely because it's been outlawed. It's been federally outlawed. So anyways, I just like to point that out. If you ever sell a home that's over 100 years old, that's what you're gonna see. So the CC&Rs are still alive and well, but eventually those will be removed. If there's a homeowners association, they need to make sure that they check yes and then explain that there's an HOA. Yeah.
How do you find out if there's CC&Rs?
Through the title company or escrow company. So escrow and title are interchangeable here in Sacramento. So the title, or in Northern California. So the title company will pull what's called a preliminary title report. That prelim, and I'll show it to you. That prelim is going to have a link to the CC&Rs. You click on that, and then this old document pops up, and it's the recorded document that lists out the CC&Rs. And okay, so CC&Rs versus HOA. CC&Rs are, again, laws that run with the land. They are not, they are imposable. So they are imposed. If you decide to get a horse and you're on less than an acre, someone's going to come and talk to you about that. The city, or someone can turn you in. It depending upon the neighborhood, depends upon, and who lives in it, depends upon who's who's enacting or controlling these CCNRs, meaning that who's turning people in, right? The city's not rolling around on a regular basis determining if you're following the CCNRs. And you can see that in certain neighborhoods like North Highlands, Del Paso Heights, lots of places. You see structures being built in the back, structures being built on the front, multiple animals, chickens. I think I showed a property in Citrus Heights and there were multiple goats in the backyard. That's not okay. It's actually against the CCNRs. You don't have an agricultural property. You have a quarter of an acre, you have less than a quarter of an acre in a residential neighborhood. You cannot have goats like that.
So like a code enforcement officer would probably the ones that.
If someone turned them in. But code enforcement isn't coming out for goats. They're coming out for bigger stuff, but they will if you turn them in. So his neighbors just haven't turned him in yet. Right? And so he's getting away with that. There are neighborhoods where that would never go down, AKA Roseville. The CCNRs are your neighbors will make you abide by the CCNRs. You try to do something, they will turn you in. And so there's certain neighborhoods, and I'm just pointing that out. Like those are just two neighborhoods that I know about. But there's many neighborhoods where, HOAs are different. HOAs are above and beyond the CCNRs. You've got CCNRs for the property that run the land, and then you've got an HOA. An HOA is a collective. All the homeowners have decided that they are going to abide by this covenant of rules, and it could go above and beyond CCNRs. Like you have to paint your house every 10 years, 5 to 10 years. You can't paint your house a certain color, or you have to paint it within a certain color range. You can't park on the street. You can't park business vehicles. You can't do, you know what I mean? So it keeps the neighborhood looking the way the neighborhood looked when it was built. So those are HOAs. Sometimes you get other benefits that come along with it, but the main point of an HOA is to maintain the condition of the neighborhood. Okay, so it asks, so that's basically it. It's going to ask them all these questions. It's certifying that the property as of close of escrow will be in compliance with the health and safety code by having operable smoke detectors, which are approved and listed and installed in accordance with the state fire marshals. So you have to have smoke detectors. You have to have a water heater braced. So the water heater has to be double strapped, braced to the wall. And the carbon monoxide detector needs to be in the property, and you need to have smoke detectors. Every house. It's California law. So the sellers will sign it. And then I always like to have the box check that says see agent visual inspection. That's my Avid. And then I sign it.
Oh, yeah.
And then the buyer says, see my Avid. That's the buyer's agent. He says, okay, see my Avid. And then the buyer signs, saying that they agree to this. They've seen it and they're good. Once you sign the disclosures, you've accepted them. So once you've signed them and turned them into the listing agent, you've accepted them. We're not going back. Now, if they need to do an addendum to this, they don't go back and change the form. You do an addendum to the TDS and you update it. As soon as you do an addendum to the TDS, you're now redisclosing it. So what does that open up? That 5 days, right? So if my seller misses that this is the best one, and it happens all the time. Seller fills this out, you get it back, you don't look at it. You're like, nah, I trust they did it. Happens all the time. I trust they did it, I'm busy, I got lots of things to do, or you just missed it. Seller marks no for fences. It gets to the buyer's agent. The buyer's agent says, let's just put it all in perspective. I just got into a contract on a property, they removed their inspection contingency. Beautiful. That means that my seller is in the money as long as it appraises and as long as the loan goes through. We're good. We got nothing to worry about.
So that means that even though it's required by California state law, the seller doesn't have to do this?
Yes, they do.
Oh,
I gave it to them ahead of time.
oh,
So I give all my seller disclosures before I ever get in the contract because I don't want that 5 days. I don't ever want them to be able to get out. So I gave them all of these disclosures and I said, here you go, buyer, sign them. Buyer signs them, gives them with me. gives them back to me. I say, okay, we're gonna accept your offer. We accept their offer. They've already signed these. They're no longer a part of the process. Then 3 days in, the buyer's agent comes back to me and says, oopsie, looks like your seller missed number 2 on the TDS. We're gonna need an addendum that addresses the fences because you forgot to check the fences. And then I have to give them that. Now they got 5 days. You know what I can do in 5 days? Get inspections done and renegotiate the contract completely. So if you handed me, like I've done, I just did this. We removed our inspection contingency to get into contract, me and the buyer. I said, that's fine. They haven't given me any seller disclosures. Remove the contingency, who cares? As soon as they hand me any one of those disclosures, we're renegotiating everything that we can. So what happened? I get seller disclosures and I said, all right, let's get a roof inspection. So I get a roofer out there to do the roof inspection and it comes back that they need a new roof. Perfect. That's what we wanted. We already knew that. That's what we wanted. We wanted something for me to get the money back. So I get this inspection. They send me another addendum to the TDS because they keep messing it up. The listing agent, this is your listing agent problem. They keep sending it to the seller is not doing it correctly and sending it back, and they keep having to do it. And my 5 days keeps starting over every time they do. So our appraisal came back and it was low. And in this market, they want the buyer to cover the difference. And I took that inspection that I got and my 5 days that I could back out, and I said, nope, you're either going to drop the price or we're going to back out. And I could have done that with the appraisal contingency, but I could have taken, say the appraisal never happened and I just got the TDS and now I've got this new inspection. I could have gone to him and said, thanks for the TDS. You've now opened up my 5-day rescission. Seller needs to credit my buyer $10,000 or we're backing out using this 5-day rescission. So it's a beauty. Like on the buyer side, I don't want these ahead of time. When I'm representing a buyer, I want these to come in like the middle of my transaction. They're supposed to be to me within 7 days, but I really want these late because that opens up loopholes for me, my buyer. But as a listing agent, I cannot get these to them after we get into contract, because if I do, then I have opened my seller up to a 5-day rescission and I just put my seller on the line, you know? So for every listing that I get, these documents are done ahead of time. In fact, I got with SB and I was like, hey girl, we're about to go into contract. I need all these done. And so we triangulate the seller and we're like, get them done, get them done, get them done. And then I get them, I review them, and then I give them before we ever go into contract. It's actually a condition of going into contract. I write it on the seller counteroffer, seller multiple counteroffer. Buyer must review and sign disclosure package prior to acceptance. Okay, so that's the TDS, I believe.
Question.
Yes.
So just to make sure I've got it right. So the 5 days starts over every time a new defect is found and a new inspection is done?
No,
Is that what you're saying?
not inspection.
Or just a,
No. So if the seller has to redisclose,
oh,
inspections are provided by the buyer or are gotten by the buyer. If the seller says, here's the disclosures, here's everything that we know about the property, and then the buyer gets an inspection and they find out that the AC is kaput, the seller's not, the 5 days doesn't start. The only time the 5 days starts is when the seller provides you with new disclosure information. New disclosure information is like, we signed all of these documents. Everything's fine. We get into contract. The seller gets has a roof inspector come out. My seller just did this. It made me so mad. I get all these done. We get into contract and he's like, my HVAC guy just came out. Why? Why didn't you get this done before? I said, what did he say? Oh, he said everything's fine. I said, thank God almighty. Thank God. Because what would have happened is that I would have, oh, well, he came out and he had to fix something. Okay, great. Now we're redisclosing because you had a service person come out. There was a defect with the property and you had it fixed. Great. Now we need to do an addendum to the TDS that says that you just had something fixed. Now, is that going to completely ruin the sale? No, but it opens them up for that 5 days. And if you're an agent like me, you're going to use it to your advantage. Then you're going to renegotiate. And then I'm going to be like stuck, right? So I just try to avoid all those little things like seller. Don't get any inspections after we get the contract. Don't have anybody come out until you're required to. Don't do anything. Okay, so this is the SPQ. So that we went over the TDS and it says this form is not a substitute for the TDS. So they have to do both. And it states here, seller, you are strongly advised to carefully review the disclosure information advisory before you complete the seller property questionnaire. All sellers of California real property are required to provide various disclosures either by contract or by statute or case law. Many disclosures must be made within certain time limits. Timely and thorough disclosures help to reduce disputes and facilitate a smooth sales transaction. It's going to talk about disclosure limitations. The following are representations made by the seller and are not representations of any of the agents, if any. The disclosure statement is not a warranty of any kind by the seller or the agent and not a substitute for any inspections or warranties the principal may wish to obtain. The disclosure is not intended to be part of the contract between the buyer and the seller. Unless otherwise specified in writing, broker and any real estate licensee or other person working or through broker has not verified the information. It's telling you this is not part of the contract, meaning that and it's not a warranty, meaning that if the seller says that all this stuff works and then it breaks, they're not warranting it. They're not saying, no, this works and I'm guaranteeing that it'll work. They're just saying it works right now. This is the way it is right now. And this is not a contract saying that it's going to continue to work. This is just me saying that it works right now. Note to the seller, the purpose, to tell the buyer about known material or significant items affecting value or desirability of the property. And help to eliminate misunderstandings about the property condition. Answer based on actual knowledge and recollection at this time. So this is a huge CYA for the seller. Is a seller a plumber? No. So that leak, the leaky toilet, that seller could completely get away with saying, I didn't know. And they could just plead the fifth. I didn't know. I didn't know. I didn't know. And because they're not a licensed plumber, it is what it is. It's really hard to fault a seller for anything wrong with their property. It's really, really hard. It's really hard for a buyer to prove that a seller knowingly kept something from them. It's really hard. And these documents provide the seller with a huge CYA to prevent the buyer from being able to say, huh? Sorry. No, go ahead.
What's the name of this form again?
The SPQ, Seller Property Questionnaire. So, yeah, it's just little things. Like one of my sellers had a property. It was old. It was up in the hills. The guy that bought it didn't do any inspections. He signed the waiver. We made him sign a waiver, and then we said, okay, he didn't get any inspections, sign this waiver. He removed contingencies, he moved in. There's a drain in the backyard. It gets filled up with leaves. There's a drain in the backyard, it gets filled up with leaves. It got filled up with leaves and it flooded the backyard. Okay, during a heavy rainstorm. The guy came back and said, I'm suing you because you didn't tell me that the backyard flooded. And my seller's like, my backyard has never flooded. Like, it has never flooded. There has to be something that happened. And it turned out that the guy, there was a bunch of leaves covering the thing. So the guy came out and said, well, leaves piled up in the drain. And you didn't tell me that leaves would pile up in the drain and that the backyard would flood. And my seller called me freaking out. Were we supposed to tell him that he has to clean a drain? And I called John, and John's like, no. No, you do not have to tell someone to be smart and to learn how to take care of their property. Now, if it flooded, because it naturally flooded all the time, like it floods all the time because it rains and there's no drainage and there's no way out, yes, you need to say something. So another seller, country real in the property, 2 acres, goes all the way back. There's a drainage ditch that runs along the back, but it's not a drainage ditch like that the city uses. It's a divot in their property that has been created over time because of rainwater. It rains, and then the water hits the ground, and created this thing on the back of the property. It runs through everybody's property, but it's just a divot in the ground. It wasn't man-made. The sellers don't maintain it. They just know it's there, and the rain created it. So we're at the end of the transaction. The buyers mess it up. We're like, we're going to cancel on you. If you don't close, we're going to cancel on you. And this agent comes back to me and says, well, you know, your sellers mentioned that there's a divot in the back of the property, and they told the buyer, hey, don't fill in that divot. The rain created it and the rain runs through it. Just don't fill that in. This was the final walkthrough. No, that's fine.
No, I know, but I said, don't fill in.
Yeah, that's it. That's what my sellers were doing. My sellers were being really nice people and saying, don't be an idiot, city dweller, and filling out that big divot right there. That big divot is what helps. Some things have a purpose. That's a natural divot. And what happens is that when it rains, it naturally lets the water flow away so that it doesn't flood. She tried to come back at me and say, you need to redisclose because the backyard floods and we didn't know. And I said, no, I'm not. No, we're not. We're not doing that. That's not a disclosure. That's a natural thing that happens naturally. It doesn't flood. The backyard's not known to flood. All they told you was don't fill that in because it's going to rain and the rain's going to fill it up, but it's going to naturally take it somewhere else. Now, if they didn't have that did and
Because
it
it's
did
not
rain
a
all the
defect
time,
in the property, right? Is
not
that
a
why you don't?
defect.
want to
No,
disclose
it's
it?
not a defect.
Did it form, I missed it, did it form from falling off of a roof or just, how did
No,
it
it's in the
become-
back of a 2-acre property. It's a divot in the land.
How did all that rain get into one
I don't
channel,
know.
one area?
Probably because somewhere down the line, it started going into that channel and it created a river and it naturally created this.
Or there was
little-
an area of softer
Well,
soil.
there's an area of softer soil. It doesn't matter. It's not the seller's responsibility to tell them. Anyways, I just want to let you guys know. If you get into a situation and the other agent is like, you need to disclose that, you need to call me, you need to call your broker. Because I called my broker and they were like, no. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing it. Like, that's silly. They were trying to get me to redisclose. Why?
They wanted 5 days again?
They wanted their 5 days again. They wanted their 5 days again because they were not able to close the loan and we were going to cancel on them. But if we would have had to redisclose, they would have now gotten 5 extra days. They weren't going to back out. And so I said, no, you're not backing out. And no, we're not redisclosing. You're going to move forward and you're going to get this done or we're going to cancel on you, right? So you're going to get agents that use these things as a power play against you. And you have to know, don't jump to those things. Don't jump to the other agent. This person is on the other side of you. You need to reach out to me or broker, whatever. Anyways. Note to sellers, something that you do not consider material or significant may be perceived differently by a buyer. We used to live next door to a school. The school bell rings 4, 5, 6 times a day. And we were so earblind to it because we lived there for years. When I sold the property, I said, don't forget to list the school in the nuisance. And they were like, why? And I was like, well, there's a ton of kids, there's buses, there's noise. We don't care. We've lived here forever, but that is something. And if they don't have kids or they don't know, they've never lived near a school and now they got a giant bell ringing in their ear because the school's on the other side of the fence, like this is a problem. And my parents were like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess we do need to disclose that. They never thought it was a problem. Train tracks. To some people, train tracks are cute and kitschy, and they love the sound of the train going by their house in the morning or like once a week. But we had a house that the train tracks were on the other side of the fence, And we were like, you need to disclose that as a nuisance because yeah, you think it's super cute and you love the sound of the train, but what else does that bring with it? People that ride trains? There's like so much that comes along with a train being in your backyard. So you have to disclose, train could be a nuisance. Train tracks in the backyard. It's obvious, you walk into the backyard, you can see the train tracks, but you still have to disclose it. When you sell a home in Natomas, you need to label airport plane noise because the airport is right there. You can't fly a drone in Natomas. You can't, it's too close. You can't fly a drone in Rio Linda. It's too close. So you have to label airport nearby. And it will ask you here in the SPQ. In fact, it asks lots of things about the property that have to do with government stuff too, like what's around it. So let's go through them. It says here, seller, are you aware of any reports, inspections, disclosures, warranties, maintenance recommendations, estimates, studies, surveys, or other documents, whether prepared in the past or present, including any previous transaction pertaining to the condition or repair of the property or any improvement on this property in the past, now, or proposed, easements, encroachments, boundary disputes affecting the property, whether oral or in writing, or whether or not provided to the seller? My seller said no, but if you knew about it, you would say yes, and then you would explain. So then it goes down through, are there any debts on the property within the last 3 years? So a lot of people ask me, what do I need to disclose? Do I have to disclose if it's a debt on the property? I always like to say, technically, if it's in the last 3 years, you don't have to. If it's a death related to HIV, you don't ever have to. HIV is it's protected, and you don't have to disclose that at all. At all. The death within the last 3 years, though, is something you need to disclose. Also, if it's a tragedy, it needs to be disclosed in perpetuity. You just need to disclose it. In fact, Bruce, our broker, talks about a neighborhood where he was like the listing agent for that neighborhood. He sells a house. The guy that moves into the house turns out to be on Megan's Law list. He's a registered sex offender. Really bad. Some bad stuff. Okay. So he gets a call from one of the neighbors and he says, Bruce, the hell, dude? You sold a house on our block to this guy. You know he's on the Megan's Law list? And Bruce is like, oh man, now I know about that. So Bruce had to refer every seller out to some other agent. Otherwise, if Bruce sold that house, he would have to disclose to every single person that came through the door that he knew that that guy was on the Megan's Law list. So Bruce said, I'm out. I'm done. I'm out. I will refer all of this business to someone else who doesn't know, and they can handle it. Because it's just a big to-do, right? It's a big problem and money ain't worth it. So just keep that in mind. Any order from a government health official identifying the property as being contaminated by methamphetamine? If yes, attach a copy of the order. This is usually going to pertain to like the junker houses, you know, fix and flips. Any release of illegal controlled substances on the property, whether the property is located in an industrial zone, whether the property is affected by a nuisance created by industrial zone, whether the property is located within 1 mile of a formal federal or state ordinance location, whether the property is a condominium or located in a planned unit development, insurance claims on the property for the past 5 years, matters affecting title on the property, material facts or defects about the property. That one's really good. Material facts or defects affecting the property not otherwise disclosed to the buyer. That's a big one. It's just an open-ended, right? Plumbing fixtures, blah, blah, blah. Repairs. Any alterations or modifications done from a home warranty or anything, any modification. Any alterations done for renewable energy. Ongoing maintenance on the property. Any part of the property being painted within the last 12 months. Was the property built before 1978? So it goes deep. And then if you mark yes, you have to reply. So the text overflow addendum for this one says, repairs and alterations, all siding replaced and painted by homeowner in 2017. New rear siding door, and window installed by homeowner in 2018, new fans, light fixtures, and flooring installed by homeowner in living room and dining room in 2018. Some baseboards and trim were touched up by the homeowner recently. Structural systems, property item defects, original heating unit is not plumbed. Unit added during addition in 2004 is plumbed to heat and cool whole house. A few gutter corners have been sealed with Flex Seal. So he's gone out there and done some repairs, so he's just letting you know what has he done to the property.
Can I ask you a question about the Megan's Law list?
Yeah.
So is it in there as a disclosure or no? I thought it was.
I don't, no, it's not. So the seller does not need to look it up or disclose it. The buyer is informed to check it. So there's a buyer information or a buyer inspection advisory, and it says Megan's Law on it. It says, check this website on your own behalf.
Okay. And what if the buyer is the Megan's Law person trying to find a place to live?
The buyer has no duty to disclose anything at all.
Okay.
He doesn't have to disclose, and neither do you. That's how he sold that house to that buyer.
Right, right. I mean,
No,
that's such a bad situation because, you know, of course, nobody wants to live next to somebody like that. But then on the other hand, how does that person ever find a place to live?
And that's why they have to go look for it, yeah. Okay, so it goes over repairs and alterations, if any have done, it goes over structural systems and appliances, any defects. And so he said, yes, there's some defects, and here it is. Is there a leasing of anything? So any leases on the property, disaster relief, insurance, or civil settlement, water related or mold issues. It says the roof had some leaks before being replaced 15 years ago. Boom. Is there any river, streams, flood channels, underground springs, high water table, floods, or tides on affecting the property or the neighborhood? Pets and animals, did you have any pets? See what they have. We have 2 golden retriever dogs. You have to say whether you have pets on there. Boundaries, access, property used by others, landscaping, pool and spa, talks about sprinklers, pool heater, all of it. Condominiums, common interest, not applicable for us, but if it is, fill it out. And then it goes over title, ownership, liens, and legal claims. Is there any title, liens? Are there any ownership issues? Anything that you know about? And then the neighborhood, this is the best. Neighborhood noise, nuisance, or other problems from sources such as but not limited to neighbors, traffic, parking congestion, airplane, trains, light rail, subway, trucks, freeways, buses, schools, parks. Everything. Restaurants, entertainment complexes, sporting events, fairs, neighborhood parties. So have you guys ever heard of Dovewood Court? Dovewood Court, every year around Christmas time, there's an entire month of Christmas lights. Every house on the street does Christmas lights. It's so much. Well,
It's
the
like
sellers,
a lot.
I know, but they don't ever come out. They just put the stuff up in front of their house. However, the traffic in that neighborhood during that month in the evening time is insane. It's insane. The church down the street started charging people for parking. So do you think they need to disclose that when they sell a property in that neighborhood? Like if you live within a mile of Dovewood Court, you need to be telling people about Dovewood Court. You have to. Otherwise, if somebody buys a house from out of state in that neighborhood and then December comes around and they're around the corner and you never said anything to them about this crazy thing, yeah.
And what if they don't like Christmas? What if they
And
don't
if they
celebrate
hate
it?
people,
Hate Christmas.
people hate Christmas. Oh my God. So you need to talk about it. Any past or present disputes or issues with a neighbor which could impact the use and enjoyment of the property. One of the agents, I think it actually happened in here. This is so funny. They were selling a property to a buyer and it all worked out. So I'm just gonna tell it. I think it was one of Rich's deals, but he sold this property to a buyer. And then if you walk up to the house, all the houses are in a row and there's a condemned sign on one of the houses and police tape and all kinds of stuff. So Rich is like, oh my God, look at that. Look at that. Like, look at it. That's bad, right? Like you should know about that. And then they walked on and she bought the property. The dude that lived there was actually in prison. I wound up meeting his friend at a gas station and he tells me, hey, my friend just got out of prison and moved back into his house, but he needs to sell it. And so I'm laughing and I call and I'm like, oh my God, the guy's back. Well, that guy came back. That guy is a crazy person. And the buyer of the property he wasn't there when she bought it. He moved in, flashed the daughter, the child, flashed her, big to do. Big to do. So then, of course, we're like, oh crap. What's going to happen to the agents? Because this guy wasn't there. There was a sign that it was condemned, but now people have been damaged. Now there's actual damage happening from this guy moving back in, and she didn't know about it. What could have happened? There's nothing that could have happened. Like the guy didn't live there. There's nothing to disclose. If anything, she could potentially go back to the listing agent because the seller knew about that guy, was selling because of that guy.
Was it a rental?
No, was selling because of that guy, didn't disclose that guy. It's not Rich, it's the listing agent, the seller. Now you're going back after them. Because it would be considered a nuisance. It's a nuisance. It's not just a nuisance, it's a nuisance that has now caused psychological damage. You know what I mean? Like that's a big deal. So that's why that Megan's law, like all those things get really important. But as a buyer's agent, you only know what you know.
And you only have to disclose what.
And you only have to disclose what you know. But that seller and that buyer listing agent had to have known that that guy was a problem because she was selling because she wanted to get away from that guy. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so neighborhood nuisance. It can be people. You got a house down the street that's got overgrown grass and they're selling drugs and they got people coming in and out, you need to disclose it. If it's a problem. Are they breaking in cars? Are they doing things? Are they ruining the neighborhood? You need to disclose it. If you're not prepared to disclose it, you better call the city and get it taken care of. We couldn't even sell a property for one of my clients because a homeless camp showed up across the street and they were chasing off people from buying the home, chasing people off, right? Trying to break into the home, all kinds of stuff like that. We couldn't even sell it because she would have to disclose that and then who's going to buy it, right? So nuisances can become a problem. This goes over governmental restriction or government stuff like ongoing eminent domain. Okay, so eminent domain, what does this come up? We were looking at a property and it was 3 acres and it went back really far and all the 3 acres, but the neighborhood ended at the 3 acres on either side. So what happened was is that this person owned these 3 acres, it went all the way back. They built neighborhood all around it and this person said, you ain't taking my land. That's what happens. Builders will build. And there's always that one older, that stick out that's like, no, you're not building my land and I'm not giving it to you. So they didn't sell, they kept it, but now they're selling. And the city chose to do an eminent domain. They said, we don't care that you're not selling. This is affecting the city planning and we're taking this portion of the land. So whenever we went and when I looked at the property, the listing agent said up front, hi, there's eminent domain that's about to happen to this property. If you look back on the property, there's 2 markers. And from this portion to this portion, there's a road that's going to run through this property. They're not going to take the property from him. He'll have the property on both sides of the road. But now there's a neighborhood road that's going to go through the property. The property's still sold, right? It's just that you have to tell people up front that's going to happen. Because if all of a sudden it happens and you didn't tell them, you're going to get sued. Bonds or assessments. Contemplated building or use of moratoria that apply or could affect the property. Proposed construction, reconfiguration, and closure of nearby government facilities. Existing or proposed government requirements. This is like that tall grass brush vegetation should be cleared. This is fire hardening. So when you go out into the sticks, you get people like Cameron Park, they have fire hardening. They're required to keep their grass short. They're required to clean up brush. They're required to clean up their trees and turn them back and all that stuff. It's required. In fact, fire department will come to your home and inspect your home and say, fix all this and we're fining you until you do. So it's important for people to know that when they move up there, because it's an expense. It's an expense and it's a thing they have to do. Avoid any protected habitats for plants, trees, and animals and insects. I have a tree in my backyard that's actually protected. It's an oak tree. Oak trees are protected. I don't know if you guys know this. You actually have to get a permit to trim or cut down an oak tree. I have 2 properties now with protected oak trees on them. It's very frustrating. And so
Was it a state thing or a city thing?
it's a state thing.
Oh,
Well, the oak tree isn't even in your backyard, it's causing damage to your property.
Yeah, that I have an oak tree causing damage to my property that I can't even get anything done to it because the city won't give a permit to an oak tree.
I remember hearing about this, and there are people that will come out and they will damage the oak tree so it will die.
Well, that's kind of a jerk.
That's
I know.
sad. That makes me sad. I don't want to do that.
Near
I just want
housing
them to-
developments.
I just want them to build the fence over the oak tree.
Or have the tree by the back.
Yeah, something.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Which
Um,
there is a tree supervisor.
I have a tree, so I have an oak tree in my backyard of my new property, and I can't cut that down. If it caused damage to my property, now she did not disclose it to me. And I was fine with it, so I'm a real estate agent, when I buy a property, I love it when the seller doesn't disclose. And I won't ask them to,
But what if she didn't know if it was an oak tree?
she's lived there for the last 50 years. Yes, okay, so yeah,
I mean-
okay, cool, no, let's do it. So she didn't disclose to me that that was a protected tree. If I can't trim that tree down, I could technically go back and say, you guys, you didn't tell me that I couldn't trim this tree in the backyard and that it was extremely protected. And now I can't trim this tree and it is causing damage to the property. It's hanging over and I gotta get a permit and this is a problem. You didn't tell me any of it.
Yeah.
There's other stuff in the house that she didn't disclose. If I wanted to, I could sue pants off this lady and her agent. He was a bad agent. And she's very liable right now for a lot of things. Now, I'm not going to.
So are you saying, like, what, you said she's lived there for 50 years. What if she moved in and the tree was tiny and she never had a problem with the tree, so she never found out that it was oak or whatever, and it protected? are
I
you
could still
saying-
go to court. I could still go to court and win. Just ignorance is not complete.
But we just talked that you only have to disclose what you know.
Absolutely.
So you're saying you could take her to court.
But you can take anybody to
Well, I
court.
understand that.
Okay.
I'm asking if you win.
It depends on how good of a case I can make.
Because you also said today that it's hard to prove they knew it.
It is.
Okay.
It is. Yes, it's very hard to prove. Any court case, you have to come with evidence. It's very hard to determine that she didn't know. She would be under the burden of proof to determine that she didn't know. If at any point in time during that court case, we found out that she ever got that tree trimmed previously, then we would want to get with them and find out if they had ever let her know. So yes, it's a huge process.
Okay.
And that's why people don't want to go through it. That's why you hear like people say, well, you should sue them. And they're like, I don't want to deal with it. Because it's a very lengthy and arduous process, but I've sued people before and won. So I will sue you very easily. It cost me $100 and my time.
How'd you do?
Small claims court. That's what would happen. So say that there's other stuff with that property that I could go after her for. So say that I did. Say that I was like, damn, this is costing me a lot of money and I wouldn't have bought this property had I known that these things were a thing. And I think you knew about them. I don't have to prove, I just think you knew about them. So I file in small claims court or I get a real estate attorney. But you could just file in small claims court on your own. You fill out the document, it's $100 and you go to court and then they have and then you both have the burden of coming and saying, this is what I believe and this is why, here's my evidence of why. And then she would have the burden of saying, well, I didn't know, here's my evidence of not knowing it. Go from there, right? So yes, it is hard. And that's why a ton of people don't do it. That's why for my sellers, I'm like, disclose. And for the buyers, I'm like, who cares? If they don't disclose and you find out they knew about it, you can sue them. Better just go get your own inspections and don't worry about the seller disclosures. Read them, but the seller isn't an inspector. They don't know, Okay. Next is the seller affidavit non-foreign status. This is just letting them know that they're a non-foreign person. They're a US citizen. They fill out their information. There's also a form that escrow gives called a Q10 or something like that. And they will fill this out for them as well. So if there's two sellers, you have to have one for each. And it's basically saying, I'm not a non-foreign person. You can charge me taxes on the sale. It also helps if they are a foreign person, because there's taxes that come along with selling a property here, and they need to be able to charge them that and collect on it. Fire hardening and defensible space advisory. We're not part of a fire. So it says here, you either are in a high fire zone or you are not. You are not in a high fire zone. You'll find out from the natural hazard disclosure, which I'll show you in just a moment. Water conserving, plumbing fixtures, and carbon monoxide detector. It's basically telling you that as of a specific date and time, there's civil code that says you have to, residents built on or before January 1st, 1994 must be equipped with water conserving plumbing fixtures as of January 2017. Exceptions, they do not apply to registered historical sites, real property for which a licensed plumber certified that due to the age of the property, its plumbing installation, water conserving fixtures is not technically feasible, building or which water service is permanently disconnected. So if you replace, what this means is that if you replace a toilet, you can't replace a toilet with a non-water conserving toilet. If the toilet is from 1945 and it's the same toilet that was in the house the entire time, you don't have to retrofit your home. Does that make sense? If the house was up, if the house was built before the code existed, it's fine. You just have to put carbon monoxide detectors, smoke alarms, water, double strap the water heater. That's it.
I do have a question.
Yes.
I'm assuming that the house that I live in is the same. Like it was built something with the plumbing, called a plumber out to fix something, and they were like, well, I can't do that because code now reads you have to do it this way. So we would have to replace all of your plumbing. It would be like 30,000 or whatever it was. So we did the work ourselves. If we ever sold the property, we would have to disclose that information, right?
You would disclose that you did the work yourself.
Just that portion, or that if anything ever went wrong with plumbing, they'd have all the stuff. Because we know it, right? I mean, that's a big hindrance on someone.
If the plumbing is working, then you do not disclose that
Plumbing's
it's
working.
defective. It's working.
Okay.
It's working. And that's that plumber. I bet you can call another plumber and they'll come out and fix it.
I didn't even do it.
Exactly. It's kind of, so I'm gonna tell you guys this.
It was replacing like a TV.
HVAC, plumbers, all of it. I don't trust anything they say. Unless they tell me they can fix it. That's it. And the reason being is that I've had several HVAC companies, plumbers tell us that water heaters and HVAC systems need to be replaced after 15 years while they're working. Why?
Eventually it will break.
Well, yeah, eventually everything's gonna break.
What do you
But
asking why?
why would they tell me that I need to replace a system that's working with a brand new system?
Because they want money.
Exactly. Exactly. The HVAC guy that came to my home is a salesman. He's a salesman first and foremost. He's licensed to work on HVAC, but he's a salesman. And he came to my home and looked at everything and said, you could fix all this, but you should just replace it because it's at the end of its life. And I was like, well, I'm like a single mom. I can't afford to just replace this. That's okay. We have a payment plan for you. So here's what's going to happen to you guys. You're going to list a property for sale. And then the buyer's going to get a home inspection. The home inspector is going to say, get a licensed HVAC guy to come out here and look at the HVAC. You get a licensed HVAC guy to come out and he's going to say, replace it. He's going to send you a bid for 17 grand. And then that buyer's going to bring that bid to you and they're going to say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we want a price reduction or we want a credit. And then you're going to look directly at them and say, kick rocks. If the system works, we're not replacing it. So I want you guys to know, as listing agents, you're negotiating your seller's money, not your own. And so if somebody comes and tells you that something's working, but it needs to be replaced, That doesn't make sense. Does it make sense to you? If it doesn't make sense to you, there's some ulterior motive behind it. Most contractors, most companies are there to earn money. And they would rather earn 17 grand to just replace the system than to parts it out and make 4. So just keep that in mind, like, but as a buyer's agent, we're getting the HVAC inspection, I'm getting a $17,000 replacement bill, and I'm sending it to the listing agent, and I'm saying, you guys gotta credit us. Because I work for I'm in 2 different positions, right? When I work for the buyer, my job is to get as much money back on that property, get everything, negotiate for them. If I work for the seller, my job is to keep money in their pocket. So I play the coin differently depending upon what side I'm on.
So when you're the listing agent, don't trust what they say from the buyer, but when you're the buyer's agent, trust what the contractor says that it needs to be replaced.
I use it as a negotiation tactic.
Okay.
So no, it doesn't need to be replaced. And I tell my buyers that. I'm like, look, I'm gonna tell you right now, this HVAC system is working. Everything here says it's working. The HVAC guy is gonna tell us that it needs to be replaced because it's over 20 years old. And they always say that. They do. I have other HVAC guys that told me this, and they're like, oh yeah, if it's over 15 years old, they're gonna tell you to replace it. That's BS. You don't need to replace it. And I'll come out here, I'll fix it. And keep it going. So when I'm working with the listing agent and they tell me that the HVAC is working, here's a bid though, because it's at the end of its life and it needs to be replaced. I take that bid and I say, okay, it's working, thank you. And I say, no, we're not gonna do that, because I'm I'm representing my seller, I'm their fiduciary, I'm protecting their money.
So if the list,
As I'm working for the seller, I'm protecting the seller's money. Buyer's agent, now I work for the buyer, and I just did this. We know that roof can be fixed. We know the roof can be fixed. It's totally fine. My client's a contractor. He was like, I'll do the roof. I said, that's fine. I don't care that you can do the roof. I'm gonna get a roof report that says it needs to be replaced. And then we're gonna take that back to the listing agent and we're gonna say, we want $10,000 off the list price because this needs to be replaced. It doesn't matter that my client can do it for 5 or that he doesn't care. I got $10,000 off of that list price and my clients are ecstatic. They're so stoked on me. So as the buyer's agent, it's my job to get repairs, get money off, get credits. And as the listing agent, it's my job to stop me as the buyer's agent from doing that. Does that help?
yeah,
What's the confusion?
no confusion, but you said as the listing agent, you would have told that buyer's agent to kick rocks.
Absolutely,
So have you had a listing agent tell you to kick rocks?
absolutely,
And then you've gone and looked for a different house?
absolutely. Oh, we usually don't go look for a different house. We just get told to kick rocks. and
So
we
basically,
move
the
forward.
listing agent's like non-negotiable.
They're a better
You
negotiator
want it
than me. in that.
accepted,
Mhm.
yeah, and then you say, you have to go back to your client and say they didn't take it, you still proceed.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It just depends on who's better at negotiating. In that instance, I suck. This listing agent just won. They dug their toes in the sand and they said
Well,
no.
it sounds like not even just, I mean, there is negotiating in there, but it's almost like, what kind of agent are they, knowledgeable or not knowledgeable?
Absolutely. So
Have
that's
they-
why,
Yeah,
yeah.
have they done this before? Do they know your
Yeah.
seller's right?
Yeah, because I've definitely turned in a repair request and said, I have a pest guy who will do the work for me. I have a contractor who will do it half price. I know that my $9,000 pest inspection, I'm going to get it done for $4 grand. Easily. I still asked for all $9,000 from the seller. Because I want that money. I want that
And
money.
luckily you had the listing agent didn't.
The listing agent was a crap negotiator, like no joke, had no idea what he was
Yeah.
doing. Had no idea what he was doing. He got a repair request. I was the only offer in the game. And so he broke down. And he said, okay, and he
When
went
it's done,
back,
you have to do this.
and he went back to the seller and said, you have to do this or the buyer's gonna back out. So that's a huge negotiation tactic. How do you show up to your seller? When I get a repair request from a buyer's agent, I go to my seller and I say, look, I got a repair request. We don't have to do any of this. We should say no immediately. And then we do. And then it's up to that buyer's agent to be bold and come back and say, no, we want this or we're backing out. That's the negotiation skills, right? As a buyer's agent, when I present the listing agent with a repair request, I'm like, you do this or we're gone. I'll threaten to back out all day long. Can't actually back out unless I do it in writing. So it's not like they have to, it's not like if I say, you don't do this, we're canceling, and then I have to. I don't have to. The seller can't cancel either, by the way.
In this kind of market, is that kind of risky to, say that you're gonna back out?
No, because again, they can't back out on me, and I can't back out unless it's in writing.
Even though there may be many other buyers waiting to take the house or whatever. Backup offers.
But if they've already accepted the offer, then as long as everything's being done in a certain timeline, fine, right?
Oh, the seller cannot back out of a sale unless the buyer breaches the contract. So this is called playing hardball, and everyone should learn how to play hardball. Because if you don't, you're what we like to call a laydown. And I love working with you because I will win every time. That's one thing that I will say, like, I have a kind of a very harsh personality in that I like to win. And I like to be right. And all my life, people have been like, that's gonna bite you in your butt. But now it's my job. And it's worked out so well for me because on both of my buyer contract, I'm currently in escrow on 3 properties. On both of my buyers, I've gotten a $10,000 price reduction. On both of them in this market. With multiple offers behind us waiting. For my sellers, on the last 2 contracts, I've gotten $60,000 to $80,000 above asking price with no inspection contingencies. So for my sellers, I get the buyers to buy the property as is as possible. And for my buyers, I get them to find out everything that's wrong with the property so that I can try to get more money back to them. Or I can get them credits, or I can get them repairs. So it really is 2 sides of the coin. I'm not afraid of saying no. I'm not afraid of being told no. I'm not afraid of asking more than once. Does that make sense? And I'm not afraid to use loopholes and leverage. Like that 5-day rule. I love that rule. I'll take it all day. Or that 5-day rescission thing. Okay, so this is a okay, so these are what's called standard disclosures. These, like, they're already pre-filled out. There's nothing for you to do but sign. Market conditions advisory talks about market conditions. As a buyer, you are responsible for determining the price you want to offer on the property. Whenever a buyer comes to me and says, what do you think we should offer on the property? I said, that's a really good question, but technically the paper says that you're going to decide. So I'm going to give you information and I'm going to tell you what the comps say, what the listing agent says they have in offers, what they're telling you to offer, and then you are going to make the decision. And I say that because I want them to know, because I don't want to get into contract and then they come back and say, well, Amy, you're the one that told us to pay this much. So there it is. Send them comps and say, what do you feel comfortable with? Get as much information as the listing agent and say, what do you feel comfortable with? Make them choose the price. Now I will tell them if it's too low. So if the buyer comes to me and says, well, I want to offer them $750 and it's an $800,000 list price, and be like, no, that's crazy.
Did you tell
They
them
have
it's too high also?
And yes, I will tell them if absolutely. So I'm in contract on a property right now. We just got that $10,000 price reduction. This is great because the property was listed for $295. It's out of the area, by the way. Property is listed for $295. My buyer said, we want to offer $305. I said, okay, fantastic. I'm going to go to the listing agent. The listing agent says we have multiple offers, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, we're thinking about coming in at $305. And she's like, I think that's good. You guys are cash. I said, okay, cool. I go back to my sellers and they said, we want to offer $310. We don't want to risk it. And I said, you don't have to do that. I've already talked to the listing agent. Let's go into $305. They said, no, we are not going to risk losing this property. We're going for the gold. We want to offer $310. Okay, fine. And then
They wanted to come in at highest.
they wanted to come in as the highest bidder. So yes, I did tell them they didn't have to do that. And they wound up coming in higher.
Ultimately, it's their decision.
Ultimate, it was their decision. But it's very important that I make it their decision, so that way when they're wrong or when they're right, it's their decision. I used to want it to be my decision. I wanted to be the expert, the consultant. I wanted to say, oh no, this
We
is
still
right.
are, but it's still their decision.
Yes, but I had to really make it their decision because I had multiple situations where they said, well, you're the one that told us to do that. Yeah, okay, don't do that anymore. Don't be the one that told them. Non-contingent offers. Most residential purchase agreements contain contingencies allowing a buyer within a specific time period to cancel a purchase if the buyer cannot obtain a loan, if they're dissatisfied with the property's condition, if the property does not appraise. To make their offers more attractive, buyers will sometimes write offers with few or no contingencies or offer to remove contingencies within a short period of time. In a hot market, sellers will sometimes insist that buyers write offers with no contingencies. The broker recommends that the buyer do not write non-contingent offers. And if you do so, you are acting against your broker's advice. So here's where this comes in, because I just wrote an offer and I said, they got offers with no contingencies. So what do you want to do? Right? That's how I put it to them. I never go in and say, you should remove your inspection contingency because that will make your offer more appealing. I say, other buyers in this market are removing their inspection contingency. Some of them are removing the appraisal contingency and offering to cover the difference between appraised value. And some are removing their loan contingency. Here's what that means for you. If you remove all three and you back out of the sale, your deposit is in jeopardy. That's it, just your deposit. If you don't feel comfortable removing those contingencies, then we don't. And we negotiate to keep them. And that's it. Just recently, we got into a multiple offer situation and I was representing the buyer. And I said, you know, the seller has provided you with all of the inspections besides a roof report. I don't know what's going on with the roof, but the agent has told me that the other buyers have a higher price than. So if you want to, you could remove your inspection contingency, and that would probably put you above those because now they don't think that they're going to have to do any repairs. Here's the clincher. If they send me the TDS or the SPQ, that gives us 5 days. So I think that we should go in contract with them and remove the inspection contingency, and then we'll get 5 days, and then we'll go get that roof report and we'll use it to renegotiate. And they said they understood. They were like, I was like, does that make sense to you? And they said, yes, actually, that's really smart. Let's do it. He's a contractor. She's intelligent. They knew what I was doing. They trusted me. And I knew that I could deliver. That's the only time. Because I knew I had a loophole. They fed right into the loophole. That agent, I adore him. But he fed right into it. He's not involved enough to avoid that loophole, and I knew that. And so I walked into it knowing. So I got the inspection done, we got the TDS, loophole happened, and I said, here you go. And he was like, all right. And the seller did what we needed to do to stay in the contract. So I don't recommend that they remove the inspection contingency unless there's inspections already on file, most likely purchased through a third party or something like that, right? But it's not good to recommend that you remove it. Do not recommend that they remove all contingencies. Because the moment that they lose their deposit, they're not coming after anybody else but you, and they're going to say, you told me to do this, and you put my deposit at risk. The broker recommends that you do not write non-contingent offer. It goes over this again. Multiple offers. At times, buyers may write offers on more than one property, even though the buyer intends to purchase only one. This may occur in a short sale when the approval process can take considerable amount of time, or it can also occur in a hot market when the buyer is having difficulty getting an offer accepted. Have you guys ever thought that you could write multiple offers for buyers?
Why do you want to?
Because, so you go out for the weekend and you look at 6 properties. You write one offer, and on Monday or Tuesday, the seller comes back and says, we're not going to take your offer.
Right, then you have to start all over.
Now you have to start all over.
What if 5 get accepted?
You should have an inspection contingency to use to back out of any.
Got it.
I don't write more than 3 offers at a time. all of my offers have very short expiration dates, because if it's expired,
What's the expiration date on the,
it's 3 days normally. I break it down to hours.
so the agent, the listing agent notifies you your offer is accepted. You have 2 hours to.
No,
48
the
hours.
expiration date, so no, the expiration date expires the offer as soon as that time hits. So if I write an offer to you and I have it expire in an hour, and then you call me and say we accepted it, but I got another offer accepted, I just say, oh, I'm sorry, our offer was expired, we moved on.
Oh, I see.
But if you called me and said, hey, we want to accept your offer, I'd say, oh, okay, great, and then we would just move forward. Because the only, contracts are bilateral agreements, and the only way to move forward is if both parties agree to move forward. So if the buyer decides that the expiration no longer matters, they can say, yeah, we'll ignore that, let's move forward. But if the buyer says, no, I'm holding you to that expiration, I'm in contract on another property, then that seller has to move on. So like, I had 23 offers on my listing. I went through 3 days of negotiations to get them from 650 to where I got, or 450, wherever I, 650 to like whatever I got them to, right? And I went through all this. Now I know that that buyer has been out looking at other properties. So when I was going to accept the offer, I didn't just sign it and say, okay, and send it over. I called the agent ahead of time and I said, hey, my seller's thinking about accepting your offer. Are your buyers still in this? Are we doing this? And he said, yeah, we don't have any offers on any other properties. I was like, are you sure? I want to be 100% positive that when I sign this offer and I send it to you and I tell all 23 other people that they're out, that you're not going to come in tomorrow and say, oh, we're out. Because now I have to start my process over again. I don't want to do that work. I just worked way too hard. So that's, as a listing agent, you should be going back to that buyer and saying, hey, are you still going to do what you said you're going to do? Because there's a chance that they could have found another property. And that's happened. I've gone back to a buyer and I said, hey, I'm so excited, we're going to accept your offer. And they're like, oh my gosh, we just got into in contract on another property. Totally okay, I get it. Awesome, thank you so much. I've got 1, 2, and I've got 2 backups that I'm going to go back to. And then I go to the next one. And then I go to the next one. Until I find somebody that's still willing to do it. But for my buyers, I tell them when we go look at property, I'm like, look, if we go look at 6 property today and you like 4 of them, let's write on all of them. Because I don't know which one you're going to get accepted. Right? Now, if I go into a market and there's no multiple offers, I'm not going to write multiple offers. We only write multiple offers for buyers when there's a chance that they're not going to get most of them accepted. But if you're sitting in a market where every offer gets accepted, or you're in a position where you know that your offer is going to get accepted, like you got a cash buyer and they're willing to pay whatever, you know, I don't do it. And I just explain, I'm very forthright in explaining to them all of it. Like, no, I'm not going to write multiple offers for you because you have such a strong buying power that whatever offer we walk into, you're going to get it. So let's not offer on a property that you don't really want, because what I don't want to be is the agent that gets offers accepted and backs out. I have fired clients for being those buyers. Offer accepted, we don't want it, we like this other one better. Okay, that's fine, cool. Back out, get it accepted. Oh, you know what, we found this other one. Okay, we are no longer writing offers. Because now you're abusing your power and you're abusing the system. You're going to pick a house that you want to buy. We're going to write the offer. We're going to get it accepted. If you back out of another property, I'm not going to be your agent again. Because you're backing out not because of the property, but because you're a shiny object person and you're going, this happened. Yeah. There's a little saying called, this is so bad, you guys, but it's buyers are liars and sellers are worse. And it's because they don't do this every day. They don't know the hard work that you're putting into it. They're not even thinking about that. They're thinking about themselves and what they want. And they are taking it like they're shoe shopping. So you have to make it serious for them. Make them understand that this is not just you shoe shopping right now. This is me putting in a lot of work. The work that it takes for me to get an offer accepted, it's a lot. Okay, so there's a statewide buyer and seller advisory. It talks about buyer's rights and duties, seller's rights and duties, broker's rights and duties. Table of contents. It is long, y'all. It is 14 pages of stuff. You can read this if you want to fall asleep at night. But it's actually really good to know because it talks about legal requirements like the death on the property, the earthquake, EPA lead-based paint. Like, this is good stuff to know. Does it come up a lot? I mean, sometimes. It's just good for you to know. You read all these documents, you will be a real estate expert. You probably know more than me. Okay, let's keep going. This is the preliminary title report. This is what I wanted to get to, okay? The prelim is preliminary title report, and it talks about everything that affects the title of the property. It talks about, here's the title insurance policy that's being purchased. It's a fee simple estate. Here's the owners. Their husband and wife is joint tenants. That's how they took title. Here's the actual address of the property. This is the legal description. If you click on, oh, it will let me. Oh, it's fine. Here's the APN. Taxes. Here's the taxes. They've been paid. A lien of supplemental taxes. They've got supplemental taxes. That's fine. Special tax lien is levied by the community facilities. So this is a little lien that they put on top of the taxes for the community. Assessments and charges might be levied if you go, yeah. So they've got some liens for, they've got, oh, this is an easement affecting the portion of the property for public utilities. The easterly southern 12.5 feet. Most likely for utility boxes because they live on the corner. And there's probably a light pole. Covenants, here's the CC&Rs. And you should be able to like, oh, that's fine. If I looked at the original, this is a signed document. This is a signed document from the buyer's agent. If you look at the original, you can click on this and open it up and it'll be a hyperlink. Anything that's blue is an actual hyperlink. Here's their deed of trust. This is for their mortgage. That's the mortgage company. Here's a lien. They have a lien. Delinquent utilities. They owe a bunch of money for past utilities. These are not liens that prevent a sale. These are liens that will be paid with seller proceeds. It's fine. They didn't even know about these, so it's not on the seller disclosures. But because it's on the prelim that we gave to them, we don't have to put it on the seller disclosures. Does that make sense? Let's see what else. That's it. Oh, they got a grant deed. That's when they purchased the property. And then there's all kinds of other stuff on here to talk about the policy. Blah, 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 blah. Privacy notice. Blah, blah, blah. What personal information we share and why we share it. Blah, blah, blah. Your rights and choices. Blah, blah, blah. And then there's a plot map. You can find the house. You just have to look for it. So we're on the corner of Creighton and Lock Haven. This is us right here. So it tells you the length of the property, 95 feet this way, 80 feet this way. Here's the natural hazard disclosure. So remember when I said, you'll find out if you're in a fire zone from the natural hazard disclosure. Well, here it is. Our office has Cap City NHD, which is an in-house company. And so if you need a natural hazard disclosure and you're listing a property, you can request it through Cap City NHD. It's cheaper than the rest. Most natural hazard disclosures are $100. Cap City's is only 90. Save you $10.
Why do you have to get it from a loan? Mortgage lender?
You don't get it from a mortgage lender. Escrow reaches out and gets it for you. Ow. Sorry, I said. So escrow will do this for you. As soon as you pre-open escrow and say, can you order the NHD, they will. A special flood hazard area. Is it in the special flood hazard area? No. Area of potential flooding? No. High fire hazard severity zone? No. Wildland area that may contain substantial forest fire risks, no. Earthquake zone, no. Seismic hazard, no. So this house is pretty. Now, you're going to see a lot in Sacramento County for floods, yes and yes. Sacramento County is actually a flood zone. Natomas and Rio Linda require flood insurance because they have flooded in the last 100 years. North Highlands has flooded quite a bit, but they don't require flood insurance. Weird. Anything by the river, if you have a home by the river, you will be required to have flood insurance. The farther you get up the hill or the farther you get out into the country, you usually need some sort of fire insurance. So this is the natural hazard disclosure. And it goes through all the natural hazards and what that means and whether you're in it or out of it. This goes in, are you in a FEMA designated flood zone? Are you area of potential flooding? So it kind of goes over it multiple times. Local determination, so if you really want to go through this, you could. For more military ordnance, Camp Kohler is right next to the house. Duct sealing and testing. Industrial commercial land use is nearby. Radon hazard zone. There's radon everywhere, by the way. Radon is everywhere. Natural occurring asbestos, no. Methane gas, no. Soil substance hazard, no. And then there's your flood map. You're out of the zone. You don't have to have flood insurance. Earthquake zone, out of the zone. Oh, earthquake fault zone, we're in. All of California is. That's another thing. Sellers would be like, well, why do you have to say all this? Because it's California. We're required to. So that's the natural hazard disclosure. Let's get to the end of the blah, blah, blah. So much information. And it's repeated over and over again because California is a super happy state. Okay. Trying to see if there's anything else after this. If you have to go, I understand. Sorry I've taken up all this time, but property tax disclosure. So now we're going to disclose any property taxes on the property. So this says Melrose, not levied. Bonds and assessments, not levied. Property assessed clean energy home or PACE loan, not. Ad valorem taxes and voter approved bonds, yes. Direct assessments, yes. Landscaping and lighting. The city charges a bond for that. All these others, they don't. And then other direct assessments, there's others. And it gives you, it doesn't give you any information for the city or the county. Breakdown in current property tax bill. So here's the breakdown. It tells you this is how much they're paying in taxes. This is the ad valorem tax rate. Here's the extra assessments that they put on for water drainage and flood control. And here's the total tax bill currently. This does not determine their future tax bill. Talks about California property taxes overview. Talks about Melrose Community Facility Act. This one doesn't have any Melrose, but it still talks to you about it. PACE and HERO loans give you information about that. Ad valorem charges talks to you about. So if you need to know about taxes, if you're like, I don't understand taxes, you can read these tax reports from the title company and it will explain it to you in detail. And that's it. That's all the seller disclosures. Any questions? Okay, and I only went 15 minutes over. How beautiful is that? Oh my gosh. Okay, so if you guys need help filling out seller disclosures, or you need to review them, or you need help with anything, you know that you can call me, and I will be there for you. I hope that you all have a really great day, and if you have any questions, just reach out directly, okay?